All right, hello everyone. This is the bi-weekly meeting of the Kubernetes Storage Special Interest Group. Today is August 17, 2017. As a reminder, this meeting is public and recorded and published on YouTube. I'm going to share my screen and we'll go through the agenda doc. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything you want to discuss, please add it to the agenda doc. It's linked in the calendar invite. We're going to start off by going through the planning spreadsheet. Actually, we're going to flip this today. We're going to, Jing talked to me earlier. She really wanted to go over the local storage isolation design, and I want to make sure that we have enough time for that. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the design reviews to the front and let Jing talk about the local storage isolation stuff first, and then we'll go through the rest of the agenda. Jing, do you want to take over?
Sure.
I can stop sharing my screen so you can share your screen if you need to.
Okay, yeah, that's be good.
Go ahead.
Okay. Where? Can you see my slide?
Yep, we can see your screen.
So right now it's the slide.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, after last week's meeting, and we discussed really this feature, but after that we have another meeting and think through the design again, and finally we decide a relatively new design is revised design. And so we want to only support one resource API for this local storage isolation feature. There are a few reasons. So to avoid some confusion and complexity caused by this multiple storage API we provide, like proposed before. And also it gave us some benefit of like local storage management will be very consistent with memory management. So all the behavior would be very similar, so people will very easy to understand. And also so basically we decide to only manage one root partition storage space. And before we consider second storage partition, but it's really not the common case. And normally it is because of the device mapper used by, for example, Red Hat. And but we got to know they move from that to only one partition, and also actually for device mapper is not good. They are not using the second storage API at all. And starting from that point, I will just go over.
So before you go forward, Jing, could I add context for people who don't know?
Sure.
So for folks who aren't familiar with this feature, today, we utilize a lot of the local disk from the host machine that Kubelet is running on to satisfy things like space for the empty dir, which is ephemeral scratch space, as well as the writable layer for the container and logs that are output from containers. And the problem is that most of that goes unaccounted today. Meaning that if you have bad acting pod or container, they could potentially eat up all the disk space on your host, on your node machine, and that's very bad. And so Jing has been working on features to add isolation for the local ephemeral storage, and there was she took a crack at it in the last quarter. By introducing two new resources. So we already have CPU and memory by which you can limit. She introduced a couple of alpha resources. Jing, correct me if I'm wrong. I think they were called Overlay and was it Scratch?
Scratch, yes, Scratch. That's right.
And so the idea was you introduce two mechanisms by which you can either set global limits on how much a container can take, and then set minimums as well if your container needs it. In that case, the overlay would correspond to the writable layer for your container, and Scratch would be what empty-dir would use. And so what Jing is talking about today is evolving that design. She had design discussions with folks, and the decision was it might not make sense to have two separate resources to track this, and instead let's have a single resource to track all of that ephemeral storage that we steal from the local node. Go ahead, Jing. Sorry about that.
Yes, thank you. I forgot to give more background on this. Thank you, Saad. And so after this decision, then I'll just go over the design for this. Basically, for local storage, Ephemeral storage, and we have one API to represent. There are a little bit like issue for it is currently we already have one storage API called the resource storage. We use that mainly for manage the PVC storage. So right now we can reuse that to represent kind of different things, or we can use a new type like resource storage Scratch. Later we'll see why it matters. So we like which option we should choose. And so after we have this storage type, you can set resource limit and requests similar to CPU and memory. So currently we support container level resource requirements. So in your container spec, you can specify like limit and request for CPU memory, and now we support storage. And after you specify that, the scheduler will make sure whatever you request will be satisfied. And also the eviction manager will make sure the limit is bounded, so it monitors the usage. And if the usage of the container exceeds the limit, the pod will be evicted. And for pod level resource constraints, so right now we don't explicitly like have this pod level resource requirement set. So you cannot set a pod level constraints directly in the API. But we do have pod level resource constraint support. Basically, it will use the sum of the total limits you specified in containers and consider as the value of the pod level limit. So after you specify each container's limit, then the total resource limit will be the pod level. And for local storage case, because we have different type of usage like empty-dir, use Squarespace and containers overlay and logs. So all of these resource usage will be bounded by this pod level resource limit. And we still want to support empty-dir. We gave a new parameter called size limit. Basically, it's an additional knob that you can control, like how much resource you want to give for your empty-dir. Empty-dir is a pod level volume, so managed separately. So if user gave a set limit specifically for this empty-dir, then we also check whether the limit is constrained, like bounded or not. And here is a simple example. So in this example, you can see in the pod definition, we have two containers, full C and the bar. So each one have their limits. You can also set requests. So for one is for 10 gigabytes, the other is 15. So basically, the eviction manager will monitor, okay, if that container usage exceed 10 gigabytes for full C or not. If it exceed that, it will evict the whole pod. And also empty-dir, you can also set a limit, let's say just 5 gigabytes. So it also monitors the empty-dir usage, whether it is inside of the limit. And again, for pod level resource, so it will add the 10 gigabytes from fuzzy and 15 gigabytes from bar as the pod level limit. So that is total 25. So the total usage of your whole pod, including log, container overlay, and the empty dir, should not exceed 25. So is that clear? So let me know if you have any questions. So here is just, again, the eviction policy I just mentioned for pod level, container level, and also scheduler will try to verify whether the sum of the containers request can be satisfied by the total allocatable resource on that node. And so we also want to support Quota for 1.8. And so for Quota, you can set limit and request too. Here is the problem again for API design. So before, we already have a called resource request storage. That is used by representing the PVC storage quota. So one option is we continue to use that. And then that quota will have two meaning. One is for PVC storage quota. The other is for local storage quota. But this way, that means we restrict that these two values, these two quota will be always the same. Basically, for local and remote storage, you are going to have used the same request quota. And the other option is we again use a new API, and we call resource, for example, storage scratch. So you will have two quota for resource request and resource limit. So in this way, you can set different quotas to manage remote like PVC storage and the local storage separately. So I want to get some feedback first on this part. Should we use a new API type to represent the local storage instead of using the existing API that is just called resource storage? Anyone have use cases to prefer one option or the other?
So does everybody understand the question and what's being asked?
No, not really. I'm not very familiar with this. So could you give us maybe an example?
Sure. So basically what's being proposed is there already exists multiple resources that you can set limits on in the Kubernetes API on containers. That includes CPU and memory. It happens that the word storage already also exists, and it has been used to apply quota limits to PVCs. So to be able to limit the size of volumes that can be externally dynamically provisioned. Now, what Jing is trying to tackle is adding limits to local ephemeral storage. And what she's asking is that, it's been proposed that maybe we could reuse the existing storage resource that already exists and basically overload its functionality to not just limiting external network attached PVC storage, but to also set a limit on the local ephemeral storage. Alternatively, she's proposing adding a new resource, storage scratch, which would be explicitly only for handling local ephemeral storage. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And using the exact names, because the name is really defining the resource and its limitation.
Right.
So I think that it's correct. The planned way of using it makes sense.
As in having two or having one?
As having one.
Uh,
Having the one that you have on the top there, right?
So having one, the problem is if you only have one, that means because for quota, right? Basically, you are going to set quota since this API we are going to apply to both remote and the local. Remote means PVC storage quota, and the local is the local ephemeral storage. So suppose you have a quota of 10 gigabytes, then that means for remote PVC storage quota, it will be going to 10 gigabytes. And you also have to, for local, it must be 10. So you cannot not set two different quota for local and remote.
Oh, I see, because this is set in, wait, I'm just trying to understand. Is this set in the object for the PVC or the object for the container?
No, it's set for a quota object.
So it's per namespace.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Then you would need specific ones for each function.
So we in 3.6 added the ability to do quota per storage class. So I actually, after we added the ability to do quota per storage class, I dislike the resource request storage quota as a whole. So I wonder if we could piggyback off of the per storage class stuff in order to implement a local storage quota.
Can you
We
explain?
could make the resource request storage as it exists today mean everything, right? Network or local. And then you could more specifically set local storage usage as a magic storage class name or something like that.
So local storage in this case means ephemeral local storage, meaning things like empty dir and overlay.
Right.
So there wouldn't be a storage class.
Well, I'm saying we could, if we created a magic name that to the end user looked like a storage class. So it would look like there was a storage class to the end user called ephemeral storage or something like that, despite the fact that one hadn't been defined. Rather than creating this new top level object, I mean, not really top level, but reusing one of the quotas that's already there in order to specifically target the ephemeral. You get what I mean, Saad?
Yeah, I'm trying to think through it in my head.
Yeah.
Um,
I do have fear of counting ephemeral storage, well, maybe not fear, in the resource limit storage that exists today, because I don't know, nobody's using ephemeral storage today, but if empty dir started counting against it tomorrow, anybody who already had that quota set could be in trouble.
Yep.
right.
So that makes me think I don't like reusing the one that's there. I actually wish nobody was using the ones that is there, but I wondered if piggybacking on storage classes made more sense rather than a whole new name.
Is ephemeral storage cumulative across the cluster, the quota, or is this only on an individual node? So if I have like a 1 gig quota, is it only per node, or if I have a replica of my pod?
Yeah, because this is per namespace, right? Normally, I believe system might not just use an individual node capacity as the quota, but it really depends this how system admin want to set it up. They might give user in this namespace a lot of the local storage quota, like more than just one node capacity. It's possible, but also it's possible to give like smaller quota for local storage. Yeah. I don't have the answer, but I believe some system admin should maybe have different environment and different setting for the quota. To reuse the existing resource storage to set the quota, I feel it's too strict. So you don't allow system admin to set a different value for local storage. basically. It must be the same as PVC storage. And if they already use that, and then you don't have the option of setting a different value, right?
So I agree with that. I think reusing the existing value could cause regressions, which concerns me. I agree with Eric there. That leaves two options. One is what you have here, which is basically adding a new resource for ephemeral storage. We can decide on the name later, whether it's Scratch or something else. And then what Eric was proposing, which was using storage classes. I am not super familiar with how that would work. Eric, do you want to talk through that a little bit?
I mean, obviously, I just came up with this thought 30 seconds ago, Saad, so it's not well formed in my head either. So the way kind of the per storage class quota works today is you define a quota on an object called storage class name, you know, whatever your storage class is or will be named, dot storage class.kubernetes.io or something like that. It sort of is a replacement for where you would today put resource request storage or resource limit storage. Like that name, you use the storage class name. So we could come up with a magic name that we called, you know, ephemeral storage dot Kubernetes dot service class dot whatever, and that would be the place where users per namespace would set the quota. So it wouldn't be a top level. It would be similar to, they would be able to say gold tier, bronze tier, and ephemeral storage. And gold tier and bronze tier would then map to real storage classes that may or may not have a provisioner, right? May or may not have any of that stuff that storage classes enable. But ephemeral storage would magic in the code map to all of these things we're talking about right now. That's sort of my thought. So really it's just the end user would have to know the storage class is called, not end user, the person who created the quota. So, you know.
So one question about
why
that.
Wouldn't the storage class just be defined in a way that it is pointing to ephemeral storage, and then you would just use it as the other storage resource quotas to put in the name, and then it already provides the size today. I guess I don't understand why we wouldn't leverage it in the same way, creating a storage class that actually points to ephemeral.
So ephemeral storage includes things like the writable layer of the container itself, the logs that a container outputs, and all of these things don't really have anything to do with the storage class today.
Right, it's not related.
And so to extend that further, I think there is also it's not just about setting quota, it's also about being able to set limits on the containers themselves. So if we go down the storage class path, I don't think we'd be able to actually set limits on these resources, which is what we ultimately want to do. Quota is just a nice to have. Ultimately, the goal is to set limits.
What I'm thinking is that there wouldn't be a storage class, right? I totally agree that right now we're trying to quota at least, 3 distinct things, right? Logs, container image, and empty dir, all lumping those 3 things together, which may or may not make sense. I actually think it would potentially make sense. One day we might want to split those out, and then what are we going to do? Are we going to create 3 more top-level fields? Neither here nor there.
Yeah, that was the exercise that Jing went through. I think so. In 1.7, she actually had 2 distinct fields and ended up deciding to collapse them down after talking to folks on the Node team. I think it was Derek Carr who...
I'm not arguing we need to break them up. I'm certainly not asking we revisit that. I'm saying we might one day decide we want to. My whole point is we're teaching users how to set quota via storage class. That's currently the thing we're teaching users. So I'm wondering, is there a way we can use that teaching for the ephemeral, right? All we're doing is setting a JSON object. how we use that particular name in the back end, it might be too difficult to code to make ephemeral magic. I don't want to pretend that I know exactly how that would turn out in the code. This is a useless discussion. I think we agree we need a new name. Whether that new name follows on with the teaching we're giving people on how to set it for certain types of storage, like that's what a storage class is, right? It's a type of storage. I think ephemeral is a type of storage. I think that's a reasonable place to put the JSON object. If it's a top level name, so be it. It doesn't break the system.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. It's good discussion. So I think, yes, we right now we more prefer use a new name for this. We may call it storage scratch, or if anyone have some like idea or some proposal, we can also talk about that. So I think basically we gave a user ability to manage this type of resource. It's just happened that we have existing API that is specifically for PVC storage that use a very general name called resource storage. So, but we cannot change that. And if we just overload that name, it will be quite confusing and give us trouble when setting some values like quota. Is that okay? We can continue?
Yeah, and then we can follow up offline with Eric and other folks who are interested in the storage class idea and see if we can come to a decision as well.
Yeah.
Right.
I think we're all in agreement, new name. Now what that new name is.
Sure. So I will also give more detail, like use cases. Just use a name like, so for example, storage scratch. Before we have use cases, but that's for two different type of APIs, including overlay and scratch. So now we need to change the use cases. So when people look at use cases, it might be more clear. So the rest would be just like we can also support LimitRange. So it can specify minimum, maximum, or even default value for these type of resources. And I think that's the main issue I want to discuss for this feature. And 1.7, we already implement some of the feature like limit, set limit, and the request for containers and integers as limit. And we'll just complete it with LimitRange and Quota support. So if anyone interested in this isolation feature, please let me know, and we have all the proposal and document published.
Okay, thank you, Jing.
Thank you.
We are going to jump back into the agenda. We've got 29 minutes left. Let's see if we can get through it quickly. Jing, can you unshare your screen?
Yes. Yes.
All right, thank you. So let's get to the spreadsheet. We're going to go through these items fairly quickly. Out of tree CSI volume plugin design spec is out. I'm hoping to send it to Brad, Chakri, and a few other folks for a first pass, and then I'll share it more widely. As a reminder, September 1st is the code freeze deadline. That's just about 2 weeks away. Please keep that in mind. Capacity isolation resource management. Jing, do you want to give a quick update here?
Yes, so after we have this revised design, and actually we have all the PR relevant to like Quota LimitRange by external contributor, Nick Ren. So he actually already modified to fit the revised this design. So I think it should be in track, yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Local persistence storage support, Michelle?
Yeah, so I had a prototype that was working decently well, but then I think Tim had a few comments on it, so I'm trying to look into other alternatives at this point. I'm still doing some more prototyping, but hopefully in a week or so I should have a new design out.
Okay. Block volume support, Aaron?
We just, of course, had a meeting to try to finish up the last couple outstanding items. We're working on prototype, have that kind of working, and we're just moving forward with it. Still positive that it will make it into 1.8, but I guess that'll depend on the decision we make about the plugins.
Cool. Next up, enabling containerization of mount dependencies, Jan?
Oh, I read LGTMs on proposals.
Yeah. So Jan's been a Superman over here getting this out the door. He's held multiple meetings. Folks have beat back and pushed back and said, oh, how about this? How about that? He's been very accommodating in addressing those. Right now, there is a proposal out that we believe everybody is more or less in agreement on. He has both design doc and code out that needs review. We need to find someone from the Node team to take a look at it. The person that we were depending on is on vacation, so that's on me to go and find that person for sign-off. And otherwise, it looks like it's on track. But there's two parts to this. One is the mount namespace propagation, which is on track. The second part is the containerization of the mount calls themselves for entry volume plugins, and that's a little bit up in the air. Sorry, go ahead, Brad.
So I went to the SIG node call a couple days ago to ask for review on the kubelet pieces of this.
Okay.
And they said they would, but we haven't been assigned a reviewer from them yet.
Yeah.
All right. It's like step one.
I sent a message as well to someone. I haven't heard back yet. I'm gonna try to follow up on that today if I can.
Okay. Thank you.
Next up, CNCF testing. Is this newly added here?
Yeah, so I met with Clint and another person, I escapes my name, from CNCF to kind of kickstart the program. We're having another call on the 30th of August to get a better structure of how we're going to proceed and what we're going to include in the initial phases. We have it broken down into what we would like to do initially to, eventually having some sort of harness that people can use to become Kubernetes certified for their provisioners, as they'll all be out of tree. So it's a work in progress, but we are making slow but forward progress on it.
And is the end goal here certification of volume plugins, or is it just using CNCF resources for testing, or?
Both. I think ideally we'd like to have an environment where we can test everything to have some sort of confidence, but eventually have a way that external provisioners and plugins can certify against it with a set, a test suite that they can hook into and run and then provide the results back. That's one way we're thinking about it. Like they could either clone something, run it and provide the results, or actually physically run it on this shared hardware and also provide the results. And then that would give any customers, some sort of confidence of reliability and standards around the plugins. So both is the short answer.
Cool. So it looks like we're getting the process started, and then it'll be a multi-quarter effort.
Yes, very much so.
And while I have you on the line, testing is the next item. And we marked that as done. I don't think there's any updates here since then.
There's nothing. We will do, of course, another review after the 1.8 release to make sure there aren't any regressions or anything completely uncovered. But I think we're more focused on trying to get this shared environment to get the plugins tested, because I think that's where a lot of bugs still exist that we don't even know.
Right. Makes sense. Okay. Thank you, Aaron. Next up, Azure DD refactor is already completed. Thanks, Jace, for that. Supporting attach detach for new volume plug or for additional volume plugins. Wamin?
So we have one for Fab channel, and Missouri is working on the iSCSI one. There was a PR out, so we're going to have that one. RBD is going to be a more complicated case. I think iSCSI also had a similar issue, but we are trying to get those in 1.8.
Okay. I think we were discussing the volume reconstruction issues earlier this week on our team.
Mm-hmm.
And Jing and Michelle pointed out that adding attach and detach to new volume plugins could possibly expose them to issues there.
Yes.
Might be something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, so Michiro and Michelle, we had a discussion about that.
Okay.
So we're going to address those issues.
Awesome. Next up, volume plugin metrics. Hemant?
Hemant is on PTO.
Okay.
So there's another issue I pasted in the chat that Jing's working out a proposal for exposing storage metrics. I think these two are one and the same.
Actually, these are, Brad, this is Vaibhav, these are different. As far as I understand, the one that Jing and I are working on is to expose the metrics that are already reported, the stats that are already reported, expose those, versus I think what the other proposal was, Hemant's, was to add additional metrics from plugins.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay, so the one I pasted, that means that's the reporting side of it, and then it's to add additional.
Exactly. Right.
Okay.
So the reporting side has some holes, and we're trying to fill those holes. We're not always reporting everything, and then we're not exposing them to Prometheus or other metrics collectors. And then the other one will just add more metrics that will get surfaced.
Okay.
Together.
So this is definitely still in progress, because we had some ideas for other metrics we may want to add, but we haven't formalized enough for the proposal yet.
Okay. Do you know when Hemant's going to be back?
It should be in the next week or two,
Okay.
But if not, I'll be taking over the work.
No worries. And if we have to punt this to the next quarter, it's not super critical, so that wouldn't be the end of the world. Okay. Next up, NFS wedging issue, which we decided we're not moving forward with for this quarter. Snapshots. Tomas or Jing, do you guys want to give an update?
I may. There's been some updates to the external controller to the proof of concept, and I have the proposal accepted to the external storage in Kubernetes incubator.
Nice.
So I would like to move it forward in next weeks, hopefully.
Does that still need to be tracked as part of the work that we're doing for 1.8 since it's external?
Perhaps no, because if we want to have it as an external controller, then we don't need to track it here.
I guess we could still keep tracking it in this spreadsheet, but we don't need to track it for the release.
Just good to track for visibility to the SIG.
Yeah.
Okay.
And shouldn't be eventually internal.
Yeah, that is what I'd hope for.
So which release we're going to have in 3 snapshot if we have 1.8 for external? Would 1.9 be a target?
Yeah, 1.9 I think could be the target for internal.
Wait. 1.8 ends in 2 weeks.
It's almost there, right? The design proposal merged.
Yeah, with external storage.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we won't get the 1.9 in tree. I mean, we'll have the 1.8 out of tree for snapshots, and then 1.9 we'll have it try to move it in tree.
Okay, that sounds good.
So for that feature, I just have some controller design kind of issue I want to address, but we haven't got enough time. Someone from external, like Jan Xing, is helping on controller. So I hope we can like get more done for this. But I think API design is finished, but yeah, the only thing is left is controller part.
Okay. Next up, resizing volume support. Brad? Are you there, Brad?
Oh, sorry, I was talking on mute. So the API objects is in a PR, and that one's ready to go with the API changes. And then the controller is also in a PR, but I think that's a little more controversial, and it needs a rebase.
Okay.
But this is
Appears
still
to be on track. Awesome.
Yeah.
Exposing storage classes. So we're skipping that. We're not tracking it for this quarter anymore. Improve flex volume deployment. Chang, do you want to give an update here?
Sure. I have the implementation PR ready, and it's currently under review. Working on getting the test out the door.
Okay. Fix broken volume reconstruction. We had a meeting about this week with Chakri and a few other folks from the SIG. Chakri, do you want to give a summary of that?
Yes. So we realized the amount of changes we're trying to just fix this one corner case seems to be like overwhelming. So for now, we're not going to do anything, and we will just update the documentation for flex volume, saying that we will not be supporting the volume name for volumes which are specified inline in a pod spec.
Okay.
Eventually, we will try to address it as part of a kubelet checkpointing if that's going to take shape going forward.
Cool. Yeah, basically we had a big meeting about this and we all agreed that it's a problem. But we also agreed that the amount of, or the changes that were required would extend the scope of what the volume manager code is responsible for. We would potentially have to introduce new files which require having some sort of API versioning, backwards compatibility, and so on and so forth, and whether that would be worthwhile. And we talked about if we were doing that, we were kind of trying to replace what the API server does today, and why not use that? And possibly the real behavior that we're trying to work around is the fact that the API objects get deleted underneath us, which causes funny behaviors, and maybe we should work on that instead. But really what we decided is that we don't have enough data to indicate that the problems that we have from this are large enough to justify the amount of work it would require to fix it at this point. We're going to continue to track it over the next few quarters. There's already an effort outside of this group to try to checkpoint the internal state of kubelet, and we're hoping to piggyback off of that work, possibly to just have this implicitly fixed for us, but we'll keep an eye on that for the future. So we're not going to continue to track this for 1.8. Next up, host path volume type. Anybody here to give an update? I'm going to mark that red to follow up offline. Mount options to GA.
Yeah, so this is kind of a procedural thing I should probably know, but the proposal for this is, in the community repo, the feedback's been addressed, and we're at the point where it should be merged, but I'm not sure who flips the switch to actually merge it.
Has it been approved already?
By who?
Somebody in the storage SIG, I guess.
Yeah, I approve it. It's good. It's just in that community repo.
So the community repo is in the process of getting automation set up. I think so far everything has been manual. I think either you or I or someone else who has the permission can probably go ahead and merge it manually right now. but within the next few days, I believe automation is being turned on. So it'll start happening automatically at some point by the KDS bot.
Okay, I'll look at merging this then, and then we'll drop the code for this. So this one's still on track.
Okay. Next up, Wamin. Oh, I have a note here that I don't think I followed up on. Wamin, do you have what you need here, or does it need attention from me?
There's Jordan suggested new API objects for secrets reference. And potentially we also need it for endpoints reference. In contrast to object reference that we plan to use, because that's going to break the API. I suggest we have a first round of approval to add these new objects before we can just move on to use them. So that's the action I just wanted you or someone from API reviewers can approve.
Okay. Let's see if we can get Tim to take a look at this. Next up, allow configuration of reclaim policy in storage class. Matt?
I think that's why it's already merged.
It's already merged. Awesome. I'm going to mark that as done. If you could follow up offline to verify that's the case, that'd be great. And exposing storage usage metrics. I think you guys discussed this a little bit earlier. Do you want to give an update here?
Yeah, so we talked about this last storage SIG. There were a few questions around, we've broken this up into a few pieces. One of the first ones is to get the PVC information to the existing metrics. There were questions around whether that use case is valid and also the scope of the changes, whether they're going to be too invasive at this stage of the release. So I have a proposal out. I've talked to Jing about it offline. In terms of the use case, we've definitely got feedback that querying metrics using the PVC name versus pod and pod volume name is definitely preferred. So I think we do have a couple of asks for that.
Do we want to switch this to design for this quarter and then implementation next quarter?
In terms of the scope is fairly limited. I mean, there's an option in there which is fairly contained, and I think we can at least have portions of it done in this quarter.
Okay.
Just doing what's described in the current proposal would add value even if we don't do anything else.
Okay. And is there anything that you're blocked on or you need any attention?
Jing is helping with this, and so I'm not blocked on anything else.
Perfect. All right. Rook volume plugin. Is Steve or Bassam here? I want to check if we're okay dropping this since we're approaching code freeze now.
Yeah. I am still working on a flex volume solution for this. And it's going pretty well. One thing that I've been working on on this week is to use user domain socket. And the reason I'm doing that because Rook volume, the flex volume actually needs a Kubernetes client to talk to the Kubernetes API. And because normal flex volume driver runs in the context of the kubelet, it's pretty hard to do that. So I'm using user domain socket to do that, and that I'm able to talk to the pod that deployed the flex volume, and that seems to be working well.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. Are you going to be okay if I close the associated community issue to stop tracking it from 1.8? Because we're going to start getting pinged about this pretty soon.
Okay, I think that's good. I don't foresee any risk because I was able to get the user domain socket working and everything else kind of works. So the only item that I have on left in my plate is kind of on the Rook side,
awesome.
On the controller. So
glad to hear that.
Very promising, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think what you guys came up with is pretty cool, and we're probably going to use that as a learning point for going forward with CSI and stuff like that. So this is great. Next up, Nutanix we already skipped, and they're working on a flex volume plugin.
Hey, this is Subodh. Just want to give an update.
Sure.
So for Nutanix, I'm considering using the iSCSI volume plugin instead of Flex.
Ah, okay.
So basically, I'll be implementing an external storage provisioner, which will provision and delete the storage.
Okay.
And that will in turn create a iSCSI persistent volume.
Got it.
And that we would use. So that would avoid me for running extra pod or daemon sake in the kubelet.
Okay.
So what is the plan for iSCSI when we are going towards CSI, the existing iSCSI plugin?
So the general plan is that the volumes that are currently in tree will remain in tree until we decide at some point we want to deprecate these. Because these in-tree volumes are part of the Kubernetes API, we have to follow the Kubernetes API deprecation policy, which is that you are not allowed to deprecate until the next major version, which is going to be Kubernetes 2.0, or at least 1 year after publicly announcing that you're going to deprecate a field. We have yet to decide which path we're going to go with the in-tree volume plugins, but it's safe to say that at least for 1 year, the in-tree volume plugins that exist will continue to exist. Ideally, I'd like to see all the network-attached volume plugins move out of tree at the very minimum, but that's not going to happen, overnight.
So, I mean, earlier you were mentioning that we're going to keep the flex volume even though we move to CSI. Will that also hold with iSCSI and NFS?
No, it's only for new volume plugins. So we stop accepting new entry volume plugins. And so anybody who's trying to implement a new volume plugin, we are redirecting them towards Flex until CSI becomes viable. And so Rook and Nutanix, you guys were the first ones to go through that process. And with the existing entry volume plugins that are already there, the question is what does the future look like? And the future, as I see it, is for network attached volume plugins. I'd like to see them move out of tree. And in order to do that, we can always come up with like a CSI volume plugin that can coexist with the in-tree. But the question is about deprecation of the in-tree volume plugins, and that's subject to the Kubernetes deprecation policy.
Yeah, and this is Steve Watt, just to support that, like Gluster, which is one of the in-tree plugins, like we just added block support to the to enable that in Gluster for Kubernetes, and we did that as a flex volume. So like we're already starting to move out of tree. We'll do the file later.
Cool. Does that answer your question?
So iSCSI would be a network attached volume plugin.
It would be a network attached volume plugin. So at some point, I would like to see it deprecated and replaced with a CSI or a Flex volume plugin. But safe to say that it's not going to happen overnight, and you can start using it, and it'll be loudly broadcast if and when it'll be deprecated.
Okay, thanks.
All right, we've got 3 minutes left. Let's see, prevent deletion. So I'm just going to skip the rest of these items, jump back to the agenda. PRs that need attention, DigitalOcean volume plugin. Pablo?
Yeah, you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I heard now that flex path you're recommending for those in tree. So I guess that's the path we should go. I was wondering because I know it's alpha, and I don't know how stable it is. We took that path because it was alpha, and I think that the decision of going the flex way has been taken recently.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, the because so many people have started using Flex, the plan with Flex is to keep the API stable and prevent any future regressions, and essentially promote it to stable without making any breaking changes, because so many people are already depending on it. To that end, we are planning on adding more end-to-end testing to the API to prevent it from breaking. Cheng on our team has done work this quarter to enable dynamic loading of Flex Volume plugins so that kubelet doesn't need to be restarted when you add Flex Volume plugins. And that's going to enable us to actually test the interface with stub drivers.
Okay, so dynamic provisioning is already there and working
Dynamic
with
provisioning, yeah, external. So Flex doesn't implement dynamic provisioning, but there is a external provisioner that you can take a look at. You can poke Brad Childs. He handles all of that.
Okay.
Hey, Pablo, do you work for DigitalOcean?
No, I work for StackPoint, but we are in communication with DigitalOcean. We are working close to them.
So there is a Flex plugin for Rexray, and then through that, there's a DigitalOcean driver. You might want to look at it if you weren't aware of it.
Yeah, I know that's what we've been recommending to our users. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to say you're going to take a look at Flex, and if it's an issue, you'll come back to us.
Okay, yeah, sure.
All right. We've already reviewed Jing's design PVC metrics. We're going to have to skip that until next time. We've got a minute left. I wanted to quickly run by options for the face-to-face meeting. It's been a while since we've held our last one. Last one was in Santa Clara, hosted by Steve Wong and the Dell EMC team. We're thinking potentially sometime in September or October, since Michelle rightfully pointed out that late August is going to be code freeze. Steve offered to potentially host in Santa Clara or Austin, and I was suggesting having it be in Los Angeles this time around the Linux Foundation's Open Source Summit, since folks are going to be there already. I'm not dead set on that idea. And Ardalan suggested meeting in late October on the East Coast, where NetApp can possibly host. Any thoughts, suggestions, preferences?
I added some comments for that LA venue. It's pretty crowded at that location because it isn't just Open Source Summit going on there. There's a full week of Linux Foundation events, and at least some of the people from my team are in those others too. So it's kind of crowded if we're planning on doing full day or multi-day face-to-face there, but we can do it if that's the group consensus.
Okay, that makes sense. I'd be okay not doing it there, since for the reasons that you mentioned.
And even if we don't, if there's going to be group members there, Dell would be happy to host a breakfast or dinner just so we could have a social gathering over a meal if there's any interest in that.
And plus one on Austin. That's a bit self-serving, but if we're not going to do LA, I'll definitely throw that in there.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, usually these are agenda-based, right? And we tend to go to wherever the agenda takes us. If this is more of just like a social or trying to get stuff finished for for the upcoming release.
So what I was thinking for the next face-to-face is the big design issue. So hopefully by then we'll have a CSI Kubernetes strawman design out there, and either present that and kind of talk about that and any other big major designs that exist, possibly local storage. How's that sound, Brad?
Yeah, that sounds good. I plus one for Austin, obviously, for open resources. But should we do like a survey?
Yeah. Does somebody want to set up a poll for locations and times?
And then for that October proposal for North Carolina, that does conflict with the European version of those same Linux Foundation events, Open Source Summit, etc. That is going on in Prague, so I'm surprised Jan is in here advocating that we hold a face-to-face there. If we wanted to get crazy and hold it in Prague, by the way, I'd be willing to do it.
That would be hard for a lot of us to justify, considering so many of us are US-based.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to see, does anybody want to volunteer to set up a poll for location and times? Otherwise, I'll see if I can find some time for that.
I'll set it up, Saad.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin.
You're welcome.
Okay, that's all that I have. If you have any other suggestions for locations or times for a face-to-face, please send them to Erin, and then Erin will send out a survey to SIG Storage, and we can carry on.
And Montana will be in that list since I'm setting up the poll. Just
and then maybe Erin, if you can do the poll and have a checkbox for whether somebody can host in addition to just the text.
Right.
Perfect. That's a good idea. Thanks for the suggestion, Steve. I'll add that.
So, Saad, I had one question. I know we are out of time, but just one question. So this is Tushar from VMware. So I know that the KubeCon CFP closes on Monday.
Right.
And this is my first time submitting to a vendor-neutral conference.
Uh-huh.
So can people tell me, top 3 things not to do, so that yeah.
I think there's a lot of people here who can probably give you advice. Go ahead. Was that Brad?
No, but I can. I wouldn't make it vendor specific, and oddly, like the less depth it has, the more interesting it tends to be, and the easier it is to get accepted. I know that sounds weird, but like if you're deep diving into technical stuff, it usually floats above a conference head.
So Brad, one question. So do you mean that so demos are not a good idea?
No, demos are good ideas. Yeah. Demos are definitely good ideas. It's just like deep dives into the code that gets a little weird.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, both points make sense.
I think Erin's also given some great KubeCon talks before.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I don't know that I have any advice. It seems to be kind of like, I don't know how they base decisions on what they're going to do.
You can also reach out to Kelsey Hightower or Michelle Noorali, who are the co-chairs of KubeCon, and ask them for advice, because they're going to be the ones judging the CFPs, at least part of the board. And they've been very, very receptive to giving feedback on CFPs.
And the CFP website has a list of suggested topics as well, so that can help.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm probably, that's a very naive question, but this thing is helpful. I mean, we are interested in helping each other, so that's why I wanted to talk to you. But yeah,
awesome.
Thank you for your time. Yeah.
And a reminder to everybody, it's a good point, CFPs for KubeCon are closing on Monday. I suggest everybody in this community to apply for a talk. I think everybody here is doing something awesome and interesting, and it would be worthwhile to share with the rest of the community.
Is your sense that they're more interested in talks from your experience developing things on Kubernetes, or use cases for end users on Kubernetes,
I think there's going to be tracks for both, as far as I understand. I believe Brian Grant wanted to explicitly have 2 tracks, one focused for developers and one focused for end users. I believe, I'm not sure whether that actually happened, but at least when they're looking for papers, they're going to try to keep a good balance. I think they tend to lean towards end user facing things because we want to, promote folks using Kubernetes, but probably both.
Sorry, I missed the part about the feedback. Is there a way to get feedback on CFPs before August 21, or?
Yeah, I would suggest reaching out to the co-chairs, who are Kelsey Hightower and Michelle Noorali. You could send them on direct message on Twitter, or if you have their email address, just send them a message.
Okay, so we can send them the abstract saying, hey, this is what we're gonna thinking about,
Yeah.
and okay, sounds good. Cool.
All right. Does anybody have any other items they'd like to discuss? All right. With that, we'll call it. Thank you very much, and thank you for staying late.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
See ya.